Welcome. So today we're going to tackle a legal puzzle that's, get this, over 2,000 years old. But it feels like something you'd hear argued in a law school class right now. We're going to explore this totally fascinating thought experiment about that blurry line between a pure accident and a deliberate act. And really, it all boils down to this one question. If you do something without meaning to, does it even count? I mean, we all know intent is a huge deal in our legal system, right? But what if? What if the very definition of a valid action doesn't require any intent at all? That is the rabbit hole we are about to go down together. Okay, so let's dive right in. Our whole journey here starts with this foundational text called the Mishnah. You can basically think of it as the original rule book for Jewish law. And it's here that we get the most basic, ground-level rule for what makes an act of ritual slaughter valid. The entire argument, everything we're about to discuss, hinges on this one verse from the Bible. And believe it or not, it all comes down to a single, tiny word, you. The Mishnah reads this and says, aha, the act of slaughter has to be performed by you, a human being. It has to be a human-driven action. So the Mishnah gives us this super clear-cut case. Imagine a knife just happens to fall off a shelf, and by some freak chance, it perfectly slaughters an animal on the way down. Is that valid? The Mishnah says absolutely not. Why? Well, because you didn't do it. It was just a random act of gravity, right? A total accident with zero human agency involved. So remember that. This is our baseline. But here's where it gets really good. The next generation of scholars, they come along and write this text called the Gemara, which is basically a super deep dive commentary on the Mishnah, and they immediately start poking holes in this nice, simple rule. They spot a loophole, a really subtle but critical distinction. And the Gemara makes this brilliant comparison. They say, okay, wait a minute. What if you dropped the knife? You didn't mean to slaughter the animal, it just slipped out of your hand. But, and this is the twist, the Gemara argues that this is a valid act. The outcome was an accident, for sure, but the action that started it all, dropping the knife, that came from a person. And right here, this is the first huge step in our logical puzzle. The key thing isn't the intent to slaughter, it's human agency. As long as the chain of events was kicked off by a person, even by accident, the action can still be valid. A random act of nature, that's out. But a human blunder, that's in. So naturally, the Gemara asks, well, how far can we actually take this idea, If direct intent to kill isn't required, what's the absolute limit? And to figure that out, they come up with an even more extreme thought experiment. This is where things get really wild. Think about it. In the last case, the person didn't mean to slaughter, but they at least meant to hold the knife. So what happens if we take away even that basic intent? What if they didn't intend to cut anything at all? So here's the scenario they imagine. A guy is just, throwing a knife, trying to get it to stick in a wooden wall. His mind is on the wall, and that's it. But as the knife is flying through the air, an animal zips by and is slaughtered. His action had absolutely nothing to do with the animal. So, does it count? Well, this sparked a huge debate. Most of the scholars, called the rabbis, said, no way, this is too far. There was zero intent to slaughter. But one scholar, Rabbi Natan, he took this radical position. He said, yes, it's valid. And you're not going to believe this, but the final law actually follows his opinion. An act with zero intent can still be a valid slaughter. Incredible. Okay, so stick with me, because just when you think we've established the principle, the Gemara throws another case at us. And on the surface, it seems to prove the exact same point, which, feels a little bit redundant. So the text talks about a case where someone who is legally incapable of forming intent, like a minor, does the slaughter while being supervised. Now, you'd think that without proper legal intent, the action would be invalid. But nope, it's considered totally valid. And guess whose opinion this follows? You got it, Rabbi Natan, the very same scholar from the knife-throwing case. And this leads to the brilliant question the Gemara asks itself. It's what you're probably thinking right now. If the case of the minor already proves you don't need legal intent for an action to be valid, why in the world do we need that crazy story about throwing a knife at a wall? It seems like one of them is totally unnecessary. But it's not. And the answer is just pure logical genius. So here it is, the aha moment. The crucial point is that these two cases are not redundant at all. They're actually working together like a team, each one designed to isolate and knock out a different legal variable. Each one teaches us something totally unique and absolutely necessary to get to the final answer. And this table just illustrates the solution so brilliantly. Let's break it down. The case of the minor, that involves someone who is not legally competent, but they do have a general physical intent to cut something. So what does this case teach us? It teaches us that you don't need a legally competent mind for the action to be valid. Okay, now the case of the knife at the wall is the mirror opposite. It involves a fully competent person, but someone with zero intent to cut anything. And what does that case teach us? It proves that you don't even need a general intent to cut. You see how that works? Neither case alone would have been enough to prove the whole point. By using them together, the scholars surgically remove both the need for a competent mind and the need for any kind of intent to cut. And what you're left with is the absolute bare minimum. As long as an action starts with a human being, its unintended outcomes can be considered valid. So what started out as a really simple rule, it has to be you, has evolved into this incredibly nuanced three-step definition. First, the act has to come from a human, not just some random event. Second, that human doesn't even need to be legally competent. And third, that human doesn't need to have had any intent to do the thing that happened. It's really a masterclass in logical deduction. And this whole ancient puzzle leaves us with a pretty deep thought to chew on. This text suggests that the source of an action, the simple fact that it came from a person, is way more important than whatever thoughts or intentions were behind it. It kind of forces you to ask yourself, when we judge our own actions and the actions of other people, are we focusing way too much on intent and not enough on the simple, undeniable reality of what actually happened? It's a puzzle that's definitely worth thinking about.